Okay, so, hi, I don't know what I'm doing. This is a video that I've been wanting to make for quite some time. I just wasn't quite sure how I wanted to set it up or present it, I guess, but, I guess I'll just do it this way. The idea for this video is to do a, edit with me kind of step-by-step thing. I'm hesitant to call it a tutorial because I'm not necessarily going to dive into photo editing and how to do it. But in the past, I've done some speed edits where I would record my screen and then I'd do an entire edit and then I'd time lapse it, I'd speed it all up so that you could watch it. And I've had a lot of people request that I do it with voiceover and do it kind of step by step. So yeah, so that's what we're doing now. But the idea is to see how I went from this photo right here and ultimately ended up with this one right here. Nothing too crazy, nothing completely outlandish, but it was a fun edit, and I had a really fun time with Daphne doing this shoot. This was a New Year's Eve shoot that we did. We had some leftover fireworks from the year before, and so we decided to kind of have some fun and take some pictures. But yeah, so I guess let's get into it. Okay, so now that it's reset, now that it's back to its original raw image, I am going to first start off with some presets. So for a lot of these shoots that I do, I have a couple of different preset packs that I've purchased over the years. Presets are really fun and easy ways to just kind of slap a pretty instant look on your photo, and then you can kind of just build and create from there. Yeah, I don't remember which one I used in the past, but this preset pack right here is from Matty Vogel. He typically uses them for, let's see, yeah, there we go. So he typically uses these presets for concert photography, but I like to use it in portraiture from time to time. But I like this one, this Matty Vogel preset number 5 right there. As you can see, it's pretty green and pretty orange, and I'm not a huge fan of that look, so I'm gonna go up here to the white balance feature, and I'm going to select auto. Boom, right there. Just by selecting auto, I was able to get a nice, decently balanced photo, but it's still a little bit iffy, so I'm gonna come to the eyedropper tool, and I'm gonna pick something that's supposed to be white already in the photo. So I'm gonna click that, and it kind of helped a little bit. Now I kind of made it a little bit more green, so I'm gonna go back from there. I still feel like it's pretty green, so what I can do is I'm gonna bump up this tint a little bit so that I can get some more pink back into her skin. Looks like it's getting there. It's a little warm, I think, so I'm gonna go back. No, that's too much. No, actually, it wasn't warm enough. There we go. I think we're getting a little bit more of a natural look here. One thing about this preset pack is that he has split toning put in there, so I'm gonna turn that off, and oh, okay, awesome. That's a huge difference right there. In fact, I'm gonna go back and do an auto white balance to see what kind of effect it gave. All right, so now we're getting a little bit colder. I'm gonna bump up that warmth a little bit more, and yeah, that looks about right. Then from here, what I normally do is I like to go and take a look at the tone curve. He has these whites and these brights a little bit crushed over here, and so I'm gonna bring it back up just a little bit more. Bring that up so I can get some more brightness in the photo, kind of make it have a little bit more pop to it. And then I'll come down to my hue, saturation, and luminance section, or editing thing. And I'm gonna go to the blue, and I'm gonna change it from this more teal cyan thing, and I'm gonna give it a little bit more of an actual bluer blue, if that makes sense. Can't really see a huge difference there, but if I toggle and undo it, then you can kind of tell that there was a difference made. Not a huge amount, so instead I'm gonna go to aqua, and I'm gonna change that to more of a blue. I'm not seeing a huge difference. Oh, okay, there it is. Okay, it's right there in the smoke. So I'm gonna change that up a little bit. Go to the detail and see what the sharpening looks like. And hit this little button so that I can focus up on her eye. If I hit option right here and select this, I can go to black and white and kind of see a little bit better. I'm gonna do a little bit extra sharpening. Radius is good. I might mask it a little bit so that the area that's actually getting sharpened is is only selected. I know that's kind of a crazy look right there. And for noise reduction, for luminance, I'm only just gonna do a tiny little bump of noise reduction right there so that it doesn't look too crazy. Kind of get rid of some of that grain in the shadows. And then, let's see, go to the transform tool, hit auto, see what happens. Nothing. Well, there was a little bit of a bump there, but nothing too substantial. Gonna leave it alone. Effects, sometimes depending on the image, I'll go and add a little bit of grain just to kind of provide that texture. But for this photo, I don't really think I'm gonna need that additional texture, so I'm gonna leave that alone. And then what I'm gonna do is play around with calibration. Now, with the calibration tools, there's a lot of give and take with it. There's just a bunch of trial and error. I'm gonna move around these sliders to see what looks good and what doesn't. And for the most part, that's pretty much how this entire process goes. Fortunately, I have this really awesome preset by Maddie, so when I slap it on, it already has a pretty decent look to it. A lot of that legwork and trial and error has been already completed, but for everything else, whether it's adjusting the exposure or the tone curve or, you know, the details and all of that stuff, hue, saturation, a lot of that is just trial and error. A lot of that is just kind of playing around and seeing what looks good. So I mentioned earlier that I didn't kind of like the greenish blue going on right here, so I can start with the green primary and I can boost that hue. And actually, I'm just gonna start swinging things left and right and just seeing what the overall impact is, and then I can go and fine tune. So green primary all the way over here versus right here kind of gives it a little bit of a difference. I'm mainly seeing it, I just realized I'm like pointing at the screen, like right here I see it, but obviously that doesn't do you any good. I mainly see it around like her face and in the shadows. If I turn it all the way back, that's just way too yellow. It's kind of gross. But if I do it way too much, then it's kind of a weird magenta-y look. I'm gonna go back to the middle and I'm gonna affect just that tiny little bit right there. Same goes for, let's go to the red. Let's take a look at the red. Oh my gosh, no. So that's really bad. Let's go all the way to the left. Oh my goodness. So okay, looks like if I bump up the red just a little, I'm giving her a little bit more warmth. For shadows, let's see, make it more magenta. Nah, make it more green. And not so much. Actually, if I'm gonna do anything, I'm gonna give it a little touch, right around 8, just because I like 8. Right there in the shadows. And then for the blue, I'm gonna come in and take a look at how that affects it. Not a huge fan. And then also there are these saturation sliders over here. I don't really think that the image needs a huge bump in saturation. I can just do a little bit here for the red, but for the most part, I'm pretty much digging the overall look. If I toggle for the before and then the after, it's not a huge transformation of the image. There's some other things that we're gonna do here in a little bit that'll help with that overall look, but it definitely gives it a huge boost of color. I'm liking the dynamic. I'm really enjoying the orange street lights in the background and then the natural white blue effect that's happening with the sparklers. It also is cool that she's wearing like a blue jacket and also has like a blondish look for her hair. It kind of has a good back and forth. It kind of has a good split tone effect already, and that's without actually using the split toning tool. So really like the photo, just for that quality in itself. But one thing that I do like to do is come over here to the brush tool. I'm gonna go to the lighten option, and then one thing I can do is I can literally just go and give it just one nice little poof. Did it even happen? Did it work? Did you see it? There it is. Okay. Nice little poof of brightness. I can do one over here on the other cheek, kind of like down here too. And it kind of just makes her face pop out a little bit more, obviously with the whole image and with the And with the sparklers kind of above and below, it's kind of framing her face in that regard. You're kind of drawn to it. Adding that little bit of brightness right there is going to even draw you more into what you're supposed to be looking at, which is her face. So I'm gonna add that just a little poof there. And as you can see, I only did like 1 or 2 clicks. And yeah, so we have a pretty good looking image right there by only just doing a few adjustments over here with the tools here in Lightroom. Actually, if I wanted to give it just even a little bit more, I could do like 0.1% of a boost. I mean, look at the difference that makes, just 0.10. 0.1 makes a huge boost. I kind of like it. I don't know, I can't decide. That one looks more dramatic, I guess, and that one's just a tiny bit more. But see, like, it's such a small difference that that it really doesn't make it doesn't make a huge impact. But I don't know, it comes down to personal preference. Okay, so I'm liking the overall image right here. Nothing I really want to change about the look. But I do want to take this a step further, and I'm going to take it from Lightroom and import it into Photoshop so I can go and do a couple more things. What I really like using Photoshop for is for any sort of retouching, and that's a little bit more specific towards, you know, if the subject has any sort of blemishes or any hairs or flyaways or things like that, I take it into Photoshop so that I can edit that. But also for this particular image, I want to go in and add a few more elements that would make it pop even more. Specifically speaking, I want to go and add some more sparks into the image, because while this one, while where we're at right now already looks really cool, if I just add a few more, it's going to be that much of a difference in terms of what kind of impact and effect that it has on the viewers. So I'm going to hit Command E while I have the photo highlighted, and I'm going to wait for Photoshop to open. I'm gonna have to cut this part out because it's showing a lot of other Photoshop projects that I'm not allowed to share yet. All right, perfect, here we go. So now we have the background layer right here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit Command J, which will make a copy, and then I'm gonna hit Command G, all in the same steps, so that I can put that layer into a group. The only reason why I'm doing that is because as I continue to make adjustments, I can just collapse the group, or I can just hide it so I can see what the first image looks like, what the first image looked like, and then what the adjustments made it look like. And from here, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna start taking a look at what I can do in terms of retouching. So there's a method that I use called frequency separation. I'm gonna go into the window and hit Actions. And I have the frequency separation action already saved. I believe I got it from a YouTuber named Jessica Kobasi. I'll link it down below. But essentially what it does, here we go, I'm gonna run that action. But essentially what it does, it actually takes your image and it separates it into 2 separate categories, or frequencies, I suppose. The first category, or the first section being, well, you can see it doing its thing right here. The first section, which is labeled under skin here, when you hide the texture, what it does is it takes all of the different colors and the different tones and the different color ranges, I suppose, and it separates all of that from what the texture is right here. And if I hide everything but the texture, you'll see everything here is what is supposed to be all of the finer details that is essentially slapped on top of the colors and tones and shades and everything like that, and that's where you get your image from. So if I come in here and make any sort of adjustments to the skin tone or the skin layer, let's say if I want to paint this right here, for example, well, all of that is being affected on the skin layer underneath the texture layer. Okay, so obviously I don't want that, so I'm gonna bring those back. I'm gonna hit Command Z. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come over here and hit the healing brush tool, and I'm going to adjust the size by using the brackets. And for skin, I'm really trying to find areas that are not very consistent in terms of colors and tones. So I'm gonna use Option to sample this area over here, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna start patching up different little areas For example, you can kind of see it's pretty dark right here, so I'm gonna cover that up by sampling some other parts of the image, which gives it a really natural look. Come down to her cheek and just kind of get rid of some darker details, for example, right there. And just kind of keep going at it until I feel like it looks better. Now keep in mind, whenever I originally did this photo, I knew it was only gonna live and exist on Instagram or Twitter, so I didn't really go too far into depth with this process. I just wanted to do a little once over just to give it a little bit more of a nice glossy, polished look. But if this were going to be a magazine cover, or if this were going to be a poster, something that was going to get printed out and needed to be absolutely perfect, then yeah, I would take my time and I would definitely go in and do this a lot more thoroughly. But for the most part, I'm kind of getting what I want. Let's see if I go to my texture layer, bring it back. Now it's not just one gigantic blur. It's a little bit easier on your eyes. And if I hit the frequency separation tab right here, you can see what was affected. Nothing super crazy. I didn't really need to do a whole lot of work. Daphne already has really nice skin, and that plus with her makeup and with everything else going on, I didn't really need to do a whole lot. But one thing that is kind of bugging me is the way look at me, I'm over here pointing at my screen again. One thing that is bugging me is the way that this shadow is happening right underneath her eye, right on her nose. And that's happening because that light source is so harsh that it's going to really show anything that is existing right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Lasso Tool by hitting L, and I'm going to do a little bit of a shortcut. I'm going to highlight the parts that I want to be basically smoothed out. And after highlighting that, making sure I have skin selected over here, I'm going to do Command Option Shift G, which I don't know if that's the real official keyboard shortcut, but that's the one that I guess use. I might have created it, I'm not sure. But I'm going to go over here and I'm going to preview what it looks like smoothed out. So I'm going to turn off preview, see what it looks like, and then I'm going to turn it back on. And oh yeah, that looks way less dramatic, way less defined. That way your attention isn't going to be brought up to this point. So I'm going to go back to J, hit the healing brush tool. I'm going to select texture this time though, because whenever I untoggle all of these for the texture, because this one line right here is so defined, well, I'm going to need to attack the texture part in order to really get rid of that line. Just doing the skin layer or the low frequency layer won't be enough. And keep in mind, I'm using parts of the original photo as a sample source so that it doesn't look too crazy whenever I'm stamping it out. There's a little bit of a line right there, so I'm going to sample and drag that out, get rid of that. One thing that I'm noticing over here is that there is one flyaway that I'm not liking, so I can pretty much patch this out pretty quickly. Again, if this were for a professional shoot or if this was a paid client, I would go through and make sure it was done a lot more thoroughly, but for the sake of not making this a super long video, we will kind of gloss over it pretty quickly. Anything else? Yeah, these parts right here are kind of distracting. It looks like maybe some of the parts of like her eye makeup came down over here. I don't know if that's glitter or what she would call it, but I'm gonna get rid of those little spots right there. And if I zoom out and I get rid of the frequency separation, you can see what was affected. Realistically, you're looking at her forehead, you're looking at her nose, chin area right over here. And if I hit it, yeah, as you can see, not a whole lot of stuff was done, but it does make a little bit of a difference on the final image. But yeah, It's pretty simple. Honestly, if I were to print this out, I'd maybe go onto her forehead and her nose a little bit more, but for the most part, I'm pretty stoked on how it's looking so far. Now, this is where we get into the real photo manipulation. As far as everything I've done up to now, I've adjusted the colors, I've boosted those colors to my liking, I've balanced them out, and I did a little very brief touch up on her face. But where we're really going to go into the manipulation part is I want to add a few more sparks, nothing super crazy, but I do want to add a few more just to give it that little, that little boost, that nice little extra touch. But here, I don't really have any extra sparks to work with, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to another photo from that same shoot that had more sparks, that I can kind of borrow those sparks and import it into this image, lay it down on top, blend it together, and then it'll look really neat. Okay, so from here, what we're going to do is we're going to go back into Lightroom. Okay, perfect. So here's a photo right here that I wasn't entirely stoked on. She's a little overexposed right here. The expression is just kind of, she just kind of looks a little shocked, and yeah, so I wouldn't use this photo naturally, but I do see a lot of sparks over here with not a whole lot of stuff going on behind it, so that would be a really good sample for the final image. So I'm gonna hit Command E again, and it's gonna open this photo into Photoshop, and from there I'm going to grab those sparks and put it onto the other image. So here we go, it's nice and loaded and ready for our using. So I'm gonna hit the Lasso Tool. I don't really need to worry about layers because I don't care what happens to this photo, and I'm gonna circle around, and I don't want to cut anything off, so I'm gonna kind of squeeze right there. Yeah. Boom, collect that, hit Command C for copy, go back to the original one right over here, and when I hit Command V, it's going to paste the what I borrowed from over here right on top, and it's gonna create a new layer, which is perfect, because from here what I'm gonna do is I'm going to start manipulating and adjusting it in a much more natural fashion. So after manipulating it, I'm gonna hit return or enter, get it nice and prepared, but as you can see, you can tell that it's just a big blob. You can tell that it wasn't a part of the original image. So what I could do is I could take the eraser and start buffing around and kind of just go into each individual spark, but there's an easier way. So what we can do is, with this selected and making sure that we have that layer on, what we can do is go through the different blending modes and see what is gonna give us the best start to work with. Something like that. Anyway, so we're gonna go in and take a look at some of these options. Dissolve, darken, multiply. Oof, yeah, these for the most, well, actually that one's not so bad. For the most part, most of these aren't going to, oh, that one's actually pretty good too. Not all of them are gonna work, and only some of them probably for the most part are gonna do what you're looking for, but if you're lucky, that one's good, but so is line. I like this one more. But if you're lucky, you can actually go in and find one that will give you a pretty decent look. And right now, that one is lighten. So if I select lighten, it pretty much has done a good majority of the work. Over here, where this layer is lighter as opposed to where it's darker, this looks pretty natural. And if I didn't know, I probably would have assumed that this was a part of the original image. But one thing to consider is right here on the bottom where it's darker, you can see where that layer starts kind of peeking in. So what I'm gonna wanna do is I'm gonna hit E for eraser. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna lower that flow so that that it doesn't affect it too hard right up front. I'm gonna lower the opacity a little bit, make sure I have a nice soft round brush, and I'm gonna start erasing these these little spots right over here, because they don't need to be in the final image. Actually, I'm gonna boost these up because I want to make sure we get rid of all of it. So I'm gonna go around, making sure not to hit the sparks themselves. Was that part of it? I can't remember. See, that's the thing. Sometimes it blends so well. I don't remember what was a part of the original image and what wasn't. But, okay. I'll say that one looks pretty good, especially if it's just going on Instagram. But anyway, so looking at this image, I mean, what would you assume is not actually there? Just that little part right there? I mean, I would say even without that little bit of Photoshop, it's still a really neat photo. It's pretty dynamic, in my opinion. There's a lot going on. It's fun. Her expression is really exciting. And yeah, that's pretty much it. But just by adding just a tiny little bit extra right here, it just kind of adds that one little extra touch of goodness that that I really enjoy. What I'm gonna do though is I'm gonna come and I'm gonna adjust this right here just to make it kind of like, if you look, the original sparks right here are kind of narrow and long. So I'm gonna kind of give it that more narrow and long feeling as well. I'm gonna rotate it a little bit so that it kind of looks like it's falling, but also kind of like circles around her head a little bit. But if I hit the main folder for group and I look at all the differences, it's not even that much. As you can see, you know, there's really not a whole lot else going on. You know what? We can do better. We can do more. Actually, what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna come and grab this little bit right here. Now, once it's selected, hit Option or Alt, and I'm gonna drag it, make a copy. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to mess with the look of those sparks so that it doesn't look exactly the same. Make a nice little duplicate, make it nice and long and round, make it significantly bigger. What that ultimately does, oh, actually I don't want to hide that by there. What that ultimately does by making it bigger kind of gives the impression that the sparks are closer to the camera. And what I can do is I can add a little bit of a Gaussian blur or whatever. Give it just a tiny little smudge of a blur. Because it's not in focus, what's in focus is her face. I'm gonna hit Command D to deselect everything, and I'm going to take a look. And yeah, I mean, you got a little extra sparks right there. Nothing too crazy. If I really wanted to get into it, I would, but I'm also gonna make sure that that's done right there. Command 0 to see the whole thing, and you know what? For the sake of this edit, we're gonna call this one good, done, ready to hang up. I'm gonna hit Command S so that it'll save back in its original location, which is over here in Lightroom. Okay, now we have it back into Lightroom. At this point, it's pretty much ready to go. If I wanted to make any extra adjustments to like the curves, if I wanted to give it a tiny little boost, with the S curve right there, could do that. And you know what? I still don't like the green, so I'm gonna come down here, hit -8 for the tint. Oh wait, that actually gave it more green. Look at what I'm doing. Hit 8, make it a little bit more magenta. Alrighty, so here we have the original right here, looking pretty neat, looking pretty nifty, but then with a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of Photoshop magic, we have this. And then, yeah, there we go. There you have it. It's done. And it looks pretty neat. I had to stop this video a couple of times, but I don't know how long that edit actually took. Typically something like this is less than 20 minutes, but I've done edits that can last hours and days that just take forever to finish. For this, we just wanted to have a fun shoot. We wanted to have something to put out as a celebration of the new year coming. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I hope you're able to follow along at least a little bit, and if not, maybe next time. I plan on doing more of these in the future. I have some other edit videos that are in the works. So if you don't mind, if you could please subscribe, that would be super awesome. If you could like the video, if you liked it, and yeah, let me know what you thought. And yeah, I guess that's about it. Cool. Thanks very much, everyone, and have a good night.